working on podcast number 10, this time with Mr. Jorge. He was so nice enough that brought me a beer from Alaska. We'll talk about Alaska a little bit. He just finished a little short race. Only he'll talk about it in a minute.
It was a blast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another edition of the Dicty Podcast. Today's recording is at the Boulder Running Company in Boulder, Colorado. Which, by the way, if you are in the Boulder or Denver area and are doing the Boulder 10K, you can stop by and pick up your packet. It's ready for you. You actually get 10% off on any full price item. So good stuff. Today, I'm excited to welcome my amigo, my friend, Jorge. Jorge, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Hola, Hugo. ¿Cómo estás?
Bien. So, yeah, I think that we're going to do the podcast in Espanol, if that's okay. So, anyway. No, I'm just a joke. Bad joke. Anymore. Jorge, thanks for the beer.
My pleasure.
He brought a beer, an Alaskan beer. We're gonna talk a lot about Alaska today. But yeah, we're celebrating my birthday. It's my birthday week. Not until Saturday, but
Felicidades.
Gracias. 5 de Mayo, huh? What a coincidence. All right, we're gonna talk a lot about all the amazing things that, gosh, your life is all about. I mean, I don't know, science and all kinds of endurance events. Curiosity is a very particular word that we're going to use today. All right, Jorge. So I have a question for you. You just finished running a 1,000-mile race in Alaska. What is the name of it, actually?
The Iditasport Impossible.
Okay, 1,000 miles from Anchorage to
Nome.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that. But my first question, random question for you is, what was the first meal that you had after finishing the race?
That's kind of a funny story because I had been dreaming of going to a breakfast place in Nome that I really enjoyed the year before. And unfortunately, by the time I got there, the Iditarod dog race had finished, and they had closed everything because it's still the middle of the winter. So except for the dog race, there's nothing going on. And so I couldn't go to the place I had been dreaming about.
No. It's interesting that you say that because I was reading a couple articles, I think a blog post that you wrote where, is it this year or last year, where you were trying to make a pit stop at this library. You were looking forward to it, and I think it was closed.
Yes.
Was it this year or last year?
This year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, that's just insane. I mean, 1,000 miles, I just can't think about, when I think about it, my head hurts. But it's just incredible. I mean, but why don't we just first talking about growing up in España, Spain, in Barcelona. Is that how you say it in Spanish? Did I say it right? Barcelona?
Yeah, Castilian, that's what it comes out to. If you're in Catalan, of course, it's Barcelona.
How do you say it?
Barcelona.
Barcelona, my God. Catalunya. So Catalunya in Spain, are they called like states or governments?
A province, autonomous regions for Catalunya. And then within each autonomous region, you have what used to be provinces. I don't even know if they still exist, actually.
And something I wanted to ask is all these things that are happening right now with Catalunya and Spain. I'm just curious, just because you're from that region, do you have any thoughts on what's going on, or you're not really following that, or?
Well, I don't give myself the authority to have much of an opinion because I don't live there.
Right. Right.
So in that sense, I wouldn't want to impose my thoughts from outside. It's obviously a conflict. And my wish for the whole thing is that both parties find an elegant way of dealing with the conflict where no one gets hurt. That's my...
Yeah, there's always like situations like that. I remember in Peru, there's a region, we call our state department, and called Arequipa. I don't know if you've heard of it or been there before, but it's to the south of Lima, and they always talk about, we just want to start our own country, and like they have their own passport, and but that's a joke. It's more like they just do it just for the fun. They're not really serious because they're really proud of their food, and I mean the little different things that they have right there down there, Anyway, I'm just curious about that. But tell me something. I'm just curious to learn more about your childhood in Spain. A couple of things that I really admire about you is two things. One is your spirit for all things adventuring, endurance sports, and the other thing is your professional background. You had such an amazing experience, not only going to amazing schools like MIT, but also working for really interesting organizations. So, I'm just curious. When you're a kid, when did the spirit of, your analytical spirit, when did that wake up? And the same thing with adventuring and endurance sports, because I know that you were not an endurance athlete.
Nope.
Until relatively recently. You used to think that running a half marathon was dangerous for your health.
That's right, yes.
So let's tell me more about your childhood.
So no sports whatsoever.
Okay. No soccer?
No soccer.
Ooh,
nothing.
wow.
Nothing. I was just a big brain moving around. I used to cross the streets reading books. And so it was all about the math.
Okay.
I love
Interesting.
math, and I was in love with the space program, and I knew from the age of 5 that I would not stay in Spain. I knew that I would come to the U.S. for the space program.
Since you were 5?
Yep.
That's amazing, because I always knew that I was going to immigrate here, but that didn't happen until basically I finished high school. And that was after actually coming here as an exchange student.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, yeah, this is I love everything about America.
Excellent.
I definitely see myself coming here. I even kind of knew that my wife was gonna be from here as well.
Wow.
So, but wow, you already knew. Okay, so tell me about this fascination with is it NASA or like anything related with the space program?
It's the whole package. I love the science side. I love the engineering side very much. My father was an engineer, so I'm sure that plays a role. But I love machines, and I think that what ultimately led to some of these ultra stuff is that I love to operate them. And so the notion of flying a spacecraft through space or an aircraft through the atmosphere was a very intriguing notion for me from the very early times. And when you think about flying, when you think about engineering, you think about science, especially so many years ago, the one place to go all that was the U.S.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Huh. And so when did you tell us more about your journey to America?
I didn't make it as early as you did.
Well, I didn't really. I didn't come back until I was in business school.
Okay.
So, but Okay.
So, being in Spain, growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was still a developing country. And so in that sense, it was very, very far away from astronautics or anything like that.
Right.
And so the first step was how to get to an engineering school that would open the door to the U.S. And so that already meant leaving Spain. So I went to France. And my first engineering degree is from France.
Lyon.
And I went to a school that specifically had an exchange program with the U.S.
Smart.
And so my fourth year in France, they demand 5 years to give you a degree. So my fourth year, I was exchange student in Chicago at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and then had to come back to France for the last year and to graduate, which was very painful. But during that fourth year, in the summer, I went down to Houston.
Okay.
And I knocked on doors until bothering anybody I could find until someone gave me a summer job.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to NASA.
Oh, that's incredible.
And so that struck the first relationship so that when I was able to come back.
So that was college.
Yep.
That's amazing. I'm thinking about the hustle, the fact that, you're like, okay, I need to find a job. It doesn't matter how. Because I'm thinking about when I was in college, I was not like that. I was super passive. I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this and I'm going to work for a company like everybody else. And I didn't learn that, or I wasn't, I guess, as hungry as you were until I went to business school. When I knew that if I don't get hired, I don't have a visa, I need to go back home and what's going to happen. So it's like you just have to do your best. And so that's amazing. Okay, so and what did you study in, was it electrical engineering?
It was electrical engineering.
Okay.
And then when I came back to the U.S., I got a master also in, I think, computer engineering.
Okay.
I think it's called.
Right.
I'll have to find the degree somewhere.
That's awesome. Okay, so you went to. So you said for NASA, was that an internship or a full-time job?
It was the first one was an internship.
Okay.
I think my title was engineering aide, and,
Okay.
and my salary was $7.11 an hour.
Hey, you make more here, I think that. That's amazing. And like, how was that experience? Tell me.
It was like I had made it. All of the dreams I had
Yeah.
for my whole life. Now I was driving down the road. The road is called NASA Road 1,
Yeah.
and that was just the summit.
Of course.
All the dreams had been fulfilled.
Yeah.
There was nothing else to do in my life.
How long was that internship?
That was just a summer. So
I see.
because
Got
I had
it.
to go back to France to graduate. But then, as soon as I graduated, then I came back and continued working there.
How
For
do
real, so
you
to speak.
is it because you build relationships with people already?
Yes, that's right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. I like
That's how
that.
it works.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just reminded me of all the things that I did exactly like what you did.
Mhm.
Okay. So you went back. Gosh, first NASA scientist. It's part of the show. First TED speaker. First Iditarod. Superhuman.
Oh,
Oh my God, a lot of firsts. So
Oh, no.
cheers to that. Cheers to that. Cheers to that. This is
cheers
awesome.
beer.
I'm having so much fun. This is awesome. So okay, you're working for NASA. I'm just curious. I guess I'm thinking about the transition from Houston to Colorado. How did that happen? Or
Yeah, one of the things that when I went to NASA, it was obvious to me that everybody would be crazy about space and we would all have a great time. Turns out NASA is a gigantic organization, that manages billions of dollars. And so, like any large organization, it has massive obstacles everywhere.
Okay, of course.
And so I got really curious about that, how in spite of the fact that we all knew we were there to do space, we spent a lot of our time dealing with earthly issues. And so that's why I went to MIT, to answer the question, how do large organizations get anything done? How can we improve their ability to get things done?
Right.
And so it's in a long tradition, humanistic tradition, that has different labels a long time, like organizational learning or like positive psychology these days. All of those are in the tradition that I'm really happy I got to spend some time on.
So MIT was like a graduate.
It was
like
the
post college.
It was a business school, and
right.
at the time, MIT wanted to be different from other business schools. So instead of an MBA, what you got is a Master of Science in Management.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
So you
Yeah.
wow.
It was very math oriented. We used lots of differential equations and kinds of things.
I remember when I was thinking about applying for business school. So I had a list. Okay, so it starts with like this: Wharton, Harvard, blah 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 blah, and then I took the GMAT so many times that
wow.
I was so good in practice. When I was practicing by myself, I got so burnt out. That I only got like 600. And when that happened, I was like, okay, no Harvard, no Wharton. But I ended up actually applying to 5 schools. UT Austin was one of them.
Great one.
But I ended up going to Indiana University, which ended up working great for several reasons. One, it was offering an amazing marketing program specific for brands, which was what I ended up focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
2, I really wanted to learn the language because, one thing is that you talk in English to other people, just conversational, but another thing is just working in English.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really hard, right? So, by being in a program where there were no Spanish speakers, like in Austin, there were like 30 people per year or something like that. There were only 2 Peruvians and I think 1 Mexican, so it was a really, really small group. And the third one, I met my wife, Amy.
Oh.
Amy. So that's where we met. So it worked out well. Anyway, okay. So MIT.
It's a really good program. You get to meet your wife there.
Yeah, right. It's like that's number 1. No, it was awesome. It was awesome. So went to MIT. So after that, I'm just curious. Life
Sure.
after MIT.
So now that I was armed with the knowledge of how to help organizations be more effective, I co-founded a consultancy with a group of friends that had the same interests, called Strategos, and that's basically where I spent almost 20 years of my life.
Yeah. Right.
Just working with large organizations that needed some dance lessons.
Get things done.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So was that like all kinds of projects from like conception of ideas all the way through execution? I'm just curious about what just some of the projects that you used to work on.
Typically, it was a company that realized that everything that explained their success up to now was changing, and that they could no longer be assured of continued success. And with that awareness, then the desire to find the next thing, what was the direction that they had to take, and how did they need to change themselves to be able to go in that new direction.
Talk about innovation, huh?
Exactly. And so, I mean, to give you a fun example, I guess, one of my favorite companies that I worked with was Crayola.
Oh, cool.
And, and so, it's always great when the things that the company does is something that you like to.
Yeah, it's an iconic brand. I remember when I was a kid. Yeah.
Over 100 years.
Yeah.
And we were getting to a time where art programs in the schools were disappearing. They still are. And where computers are coming in and so on and so forth. And so Crayola was wondering, what are we to become? How do we take that 100-year-old brand and keep it alive? And so we work with them for them to become a toy company instead of an art and stationery company.
Interesting.
And that was a wonderful, wonderful adventure. First to figure out what does it mean to be a toy company without running smack into the big ones, Hasbro, Mattel, Lego, and all those guys.
Like find your niche and position yourself. And
yep.
It's just talking about innovation, like what's happening with companies like Toys R Us.
Oh boy, not much.
I mean, or all these other big brick and mortar.
Sears.
JCP. Yeah, I know. Amazon, baby. Amazon. That's amazing.
It's a tough time for those.
So, okay. You were doing that, helping companies, on innovation and so many other different things. Were you still based in Houston?
No.
Okay.
The company, you can live anywhere you want when you're a consultant. And so on one of my trips, I had discovered Boulder.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I like this place. So I decided to move.
Yeah.
And that was 20 years ago.
It's funny, like people who move here, they move, at least, most of the people that I've known who move from outside of, Colorado, they move here for a specific reason. Like we moved here because I became aware of Boulder when I started training for triathlons, like Boulder or San Diego. So it was like we had a mission, and we made it happen. So the same thing with you. Okay. So you've been living in Boulder for a while.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, longer than anywhere else at this point.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I was going to say Boulder's home, but we're technically for Collins, which is kind of like Boulder. So
sure.
Colorado's home. It feels like home. And so, did you used to run or did you? Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I didn't start there at all. And the first time that I started running was funny enough when I was at the Johnson Space Center, and I saw astronauts training at the gym.
Yeah. And
because I had such huge respect for astronauts, I concluded that couldn't be so bad. And so that's when I started running.
Yeah.
But it was 5Ks mostly. I didn't do my first 10K until I got to Boulder.
Did you do the Boulder?
I did, yes, several times.
Funny. Okay. So I was watching your TED Talk in Colorado Springs, I think from last year, and there's a part where you said, I used to run 5Ks, 10Ks, but I would not even run half marathons. I used to think that they were dangerous dangerous in general. So, but then you talk about being curious.
Yes.
So what made you make the jump from running 5Ks, 10Ks to longer distances or, doing all the kind of activities?
Just, one of the fundamental values that I think I live by is learning. And to me, that's a huge,
that's awesome.
A huge engine.
Yeah.
It's an engine that turns things that other people might not consider desirable, like stress, into something desirable, because if I feel stress, I know that I might be in a learning opportunity. And so
I like that. Okay.
And so I like stress.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't applied to running, but at some point I started asking myself questions. And in particular, when I heard for the first time that there were humans that were running 100 miles, that was so outlandish.
Yeah.
That obviously any ideas I had about bad health for a half marathon looked ridiculous.
You know what's in my mind right now? You were talking about this, that you like stress, and I can't stop thinking about it. Is that related with your concept of, what is the tagline from Cold Latitudes, your company?
Thrive at the edge.
Thrive at the edge. Is that like, so you thrive when you're in situations that are, I guess, not necessarily the most relaxed or calm down?
Yes,
okay.
that there's for me, there's a sense of lost opportunity in the zone of comfort.
Yeah.
Whereas when I feel the discomfort, then I know there might be something there.
It's interesting that you say that, because lately I've been having this sense of urgency for like living life to the fullest. And I'm not necessarily talking about doing like bucket list adventures and things like that, which I would like to do sometime, in the future. But it's more like, at least at this point, it's for me starting my own business, right? And, and I've done other entrepreneurial adventures before, but it's not until now that I feel that, okay, all in, no fear.
Yep.
And, having all kinds of factors kind of working against you, or being in a stressful situation that makes you like strive really and thrive really. But okay, we'll talk more about that. So you were not necessarily you didn't used to run long distances, but then you get curious about it. How do you start running, your first half or your first full marathon?
So the first half was not that bad, right? It was just curiosity, and there wasn't much to learn, right? But it's not that big of a step. But I already discovered something that I hadn't noticed in 5Ks and 10Ks, which is strategy. There was enough room to be able to...
Oh my God, I love this.
...to play strategies. And so that was a really pleasurable discovery.
Strategy.
And so that was motivating.
Can you, I'm just curious, can you mention a couple of pieces of strategy that you would use in your races?
So it was a very micro strategy compared to the ones that you deal with in 1,000-milers, but it was my first bit of strategy, and it was related to competition.
Yeah. And
it was the back roads, the Boulder back roads.
Yes.
And there's like a single climb in that half marathon, and it's close to mile 10, I think.
Okay.
And I had been battling it over with another runner. And so I thought, there's a climb coming there. I said, this might be a great place to throw it all in so that I can psych the other guy out. And so sure enough, I accelerated on the climb. The guy fell back, and I never saw him again.
Okay, so are you kidding me? Like, do you know the story of when Mark Allen... Mark Allen and Dave Scott, the guys who...
Sure,
okay,
yeah.
So Dave Scott, he would win Hawaiian Ironman every year. Mm-hmm. He was the guy, and then Mark Allen could never nail the race. So one day, in 1 year, the guy has lost, to Dave Scott for years, like several years. And then one time he goes, they're kind of running together, and then they hit this uphill. I can't remember the name of it. And Mark Allen is like the first time that he decides to go for it. He decided to skip that 8th station where Dave Scott and Mark Allen would always stop and like, I'm going to skip it. I'm going to go for it. And he did the same thing. He just went for it. And then he won.
Wow.
the Kona World Championship 6 times after that. That's amazing.
Wow.
You were the Mark Allen.
Well, at a much smaller scale, maybe.
Okay. So, strategy, huh? Okay.
The funny part of that is that I threw it all in, and so the last mile was one of the most painful miles I've ever had to run.
Yeah. So that was the Boulder Backroads Marathon. Is this still around? I think so, right?
It came. I think it went away, and now it's back.
Okay. Never done it. What's up, Wendy?
Hey, how you guys doing?
I'm good. So we have Wendy. Wendy's
Just back
Jorge's partner.
from a rainy run.
She's a good friend too. She's a badass. These two are such badasses. So
We were in Alaska at the same time.
I'd love to be around them. Yeah. So yeah, Jorge will talk more, but basically Jorge finishes his thing, and then Wendy goes and finishes. Was that 100-miler,
Yep.
Wendy? Oh my God, you guys are amazing, and you're great. So great people. So
No.
okay, super great. Anyway, okay. So that was your first marathon. Okay,
Half marathon.
half. All right.
Yep. I actually never did the marathon until very recently. I went straight to the 50-miler.
Okay, that was the North Face.
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. Once I knew that there was no problem with health, I guess. There
So
was no
from
point.
half, 13 miles, you decide to go to basically triple the
Yep.
distance. Okay, no problem. What made you think of ultra distance? Right, right after finishing your half.
So when I heard about the people that run 100 miles, and then I said, okay, I've been setting the bar really way low here.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so I thought, I really can't conceive of what 100 is, but maybe I can learn to do a 50.
So was that the time when? So for the listeners here, there's a local running group called the Boulder Banditos,
Oh, yes.
and Jorge and Wendy, they're like basically the key part of the group. And I was gonna ask you, Jorge, was that the time around? Did you guys start the group or?
We did.
Okay.
But some of the people that ended up being in the Boulder Banditos I had already met through groups like the Boulder Training Club
Okay.
and from Fast Forward.
So, did you guys with the Boulder Banditos, were you always focused on trail running and ultra distances mostly? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you form that group before or after you finished your 50-miler?
Before.
Okay, so you started training with them,
Yep.
and then you're like, okay, let's do 50-miler.
Yes.
That sounds interesting.
Yep.
Nice. I like how it's called the endurance North Face Championships, where you can sign up for it. You don't necessarily need to qualify, but I mean, it's an
It's
amazing.
a sweet race.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So you run your first 50-miler, and then what's next? You're just thinking, okay, this is okay. I remember watching this on your video. You were like, this is not enough.
Right.
And then plus curiosity,
Right.
plus strategy.
Suddenly, if you can do 50, then suddenly any perceived limitation has just been exploded. And so now it's just a matter of finding the learning path.
So then you decided to train for your first 100. Was that because? Go ahead. Sorry.
I had a little more humility than I had for the 50, and so I actually paired up with a coach, Cindy Stone-Smith,
Okay.
here in town, so that she could make sure that I wasn't doing anything stupid.
So when did you set to do Cascade Crest,
Uh-huh.
right? 100-miler.
Yep.
After finishing the 50-miler, was it like the same year after?
No, it was. It took
The week
almost
after.
a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was, as a consultant, you're working your ass off.
Yeah. I hear ya. So how was that experience? Finishing your first 100 versus finishing your first 50-miler. Well, your first and probably only 50-miler.
No, I have others.
Oh, Dirty 30. No, that's a 50K, right?
Yeah, no,
Sorry,
the
I'm rambling.
Silver Rush.
Oh, Silver Rush,
The San Juan Solstice.
San Juan Solstice. Oh, that's in California?
Oh, no, San Juan Solstice is in the San Juans.
I'm sorry.
Southwest Colorado.
I'm ignorant.
Yeah, that's another beautiful race.
Cut. No, I'm just kidding. I'm the worst.
We're gonna kick you
the
out.
beer talking. Jorge's your
That's
fault.
right.
All right. So what's next after Cascade Crest?
Oh, what was after Cascade? Sorry. Oh, probably Bear 100, and that's in California, in Big Bear. Kodiak 100, excuse me.
Yeah.
Kodiak 100 was before Bear. I did the Bear 100, but I also did Kodiak
That's
100.
Utah, right? So the Kodiak or Kodiak?
Kodiak. So the
California? Oh, that sounds like Alaska or something.
Pablo Romero wanted to create 100, and he wanted it to have the name of a bear, and the only one that wasn't taken by 100 was Kodiak. So it didn't matter that he was in Big Bear, California.
So, Pablo Romero is like a ultra runner,
Adventure guy.
guy. Okay.
Paul, excuse me. Yeah,
Paul.
That's what happens when we pair up here.
No, that's awesome.
Hugo, Jorge, and Pablo.
Oh my God, Los tres chiflados, three stooges. Okay, so gosh, I forgot what I was gonna say. The Kodiak 100. Okay, so that was your second.
I think so. It's so long ago.
How did it feel to finish your first 100 versus your first 50 miler? What different? Like the difference physically, mentally?
Oh, big difference, because there's so much more that can happen during the 100. And then the 100 has one piece of magic that the 50 doesn't have, which is the night. And
yeah, right.
To me, the discovery of running through the night, for me, it was liberating. It was like suddenly the doors opening and entering a whole new world.
It's funny. I was reading this blog post where you talk about the circle of light.
Yes.
The time that you went on a run with the
Banditos,
and you decided not to turn on your lamp.
Yep.
That was awesome.
Being integrated with what's around you is a great source of energy.
As long as you don't trip.
That too.
Okay, so you've done a bunch of hundreds. Was running your first... I don't know, like your first... I mean, you ended up doing a race called the Yukon 300 miler. Is that right?
Yukon Arctic Ultra.
Was that the next step after finishing?
No, between that and the hundreds was Winter 100. So
Susitna.
The Susitna, exactly, which is another wonderful race. Very family oriented.
Okay.
Very local.
So before we get there, I'm curious, when did you decide to switch? Like, because when do you start getting this curiosity for all things cold weather?
Yeah. I had always been fascinated by exploration, and of course I got to enjoy that in space. But I was also fascinated by polar exploration.
Okay.
And, my life had never put me in touch with that. And now I had an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, since I knew how to run 100 milers, then I said, well, what would it be like to try that in the cold?
So you never thought about maybe doing the Badwater or any other races that were like the other... I don't want to say the other extreme, because I don't know if I would compare that with crazy cold weather, but...
Yeah, we do have like 8 different mechanisms to compensate for heat in our physiology, but we don't have any to compensate for cold. Technology is your only solution there.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
So yeah, what I like about cold, one of the things that I like about cold is the learning that is necessary to be able to stay functional and to not lose limbs or die. And so
yeah.
And so there's a lot of it's a wonderful place to be at the edge, because death is basically just a few tenths of an inch away from you. Your equipment's protecting you from something really bad happening.
Right. So was it basically, okay, I'm just curious about this race. I'm going to, of course, train for it, all of that? Or
you mentioned something earlier, and there were 2 things going on. One was the curiosity, but the other one is that we had a very important member of our group, the Banditos, who was diagnosed pancreatic cancer.
Really?
Marcy Servita.
So did she do it?
She did her first 100.
Okay.
And just a few weeks later, she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that she ran her first 100 with cancer.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were very close to her all the way through, and that was a warning for me that I better get on doing things that I want to do.
That's amazing. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking I knew Marcy. We went on a few runs together, and she was great. Like, she was so full of life. And exactly. I know that you guys, we're not really that close, but you guys were really close. So she was really loved.
Yep.
So,
Wendy took care of her in those final days.
Thinking of you, Marcy. So that was, I didn't know that. So that was an inspiration and motivation to, like, okay, I need to do, things that are definitely pushing more, of course.
And which break a little bit with, just living a normal life, I guess.
Yeah. So, okay. Where was this race, the Susitna?
That's just north of Anchorage. It's actually
Okay.
some of the areas where the Iditarod Trail goes through as well.
And it's a mountain, right?
No,
Okay.
it's actually a whole bunch of swamps, lakes, rivers,
Oh, really?
and hills. It's fairly flat.
Okay.
So it's
So is that like your rookie 100-miler in cold weather kind of thing?
yeah, you could call it that way. Absolutely.
It's like the Javelin 100, or
It can
whatever.
get cold though. When I was there, it was a little below -20, so it was good learning.
You know what I like about this conversation is that I'm not looking at my questions. This is awesome. So I'm making progress here. All right. I mean, I know the things I want to ask you about. Okay. So then you just decided to try something new.
Yep.
And then the Yukon Arctic 300.
Yeah, actually before that it was the Arrowhead 135.
135. Okay. That's in...
Just to get more experience in northern Minnesota, right on the border with the Canada.
So the motivation to do that was the extra distance? Or?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Get another dose of learning.
Yeah. And then how long after you finished that you decided to do the Yukon?
It was
300
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Yep.
I'm just curious about how you change your training when you're going from 100-miler 135 to 300.
Yeah, you
Like-
start. Even the 100. The recipes for running hundreds are fairly recent. No recipes for 300s or thousands, so you have to improvise a little bit.
Thousands. I like. My God.
And so that's Arrowhead is the first time that I started pulling tires.
Right.
On the
Okay.
trails.
Okay.
And so that prepares you for pulling a sled.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've seen photos of you guys on Facebook.
It also
pulling
terrifies
tires.
the neighbors, which is helpful sometimes.
All right. All year long. There's a photo on your Facebook or Instagram Instagram page where I think it's in your garage. There's two tires.
Yes.
You say his and hers. That's awesome.
Yes.
we need one for the pup scout.
Oh, that's a great idea.
All right. So I'm just curious, how was running 300 miles? Like, because
It was so it was a totally different ball game because hundreds usually it's a matter of 24 hours or 40 hours, something like that.
Yep.
This was 6 days.
Jeez.
So it's 650s, one behind the other, and the Yukon is a particularly cold place, and so -35 was the temperature. So it's a very different game because of the length of time, and because how much you have to take care of yourself for so long, without ever bunking or falling asleep or anything else.
And like, I'm just curious about the course. Is there a lot of elevation gain and like, is it super technical or like?
No, the
Okay.
Yukon Arctic Ultra is not technical. It does have a lot of vert, a lot of climbs, but the terrain is easy for the feet.
Okay, so the challenge is, of course, the distance, the
Yep.
weather.
Yep.
And I mean, I
There are
guess-
all kinds of psychological challenges. Like you sometimes you hear wolves, or you see wolves, and there was actually a competitor. I think it was last year or the year before that actually quit because he couldn't take the wolves anymore.
Okay, this is silly random question. Do you carry any kind of weapon or
I've been
bear
asked
mace
that
or?
in Alaska. No, it's too heavy.
But what do you do if you see like a like every time I go on the trails here, I always think about running into a bear, mountain lion. I'm getting scared.
Right. So I mean, principle number one is wildlife doesn't really like humans, right? So that reduces the chances that
Okay.
that nothing
right.
that anything's going to happen. Number two, in the winter up there, the grizzlies are hibernating, so you have to be really unlucky to run into
Okay.
an awake grizzly. Third, the wolves. They would have to be really hungry. So you just make sure that it hasn't been a bad season before that. That leaves the moose. You just stay a healthy distance from them when you see them,
Yeah.
and then they won't get pissed. Sometimes, I mean, for the finish of the Susitna, I was mile 99 and a moose was in my way, and so
Wow.
all I could do was stop and wait for the moose to step out of the way, so that I
Mile
could finish.
99.
Yes.
That's awesome.
What else? Then you have wolverines. They're very difficult to see. You have hares. You see lots of those. Ptarmigan. Of course, those you don't have to worry about. That's about it, really.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
and bison. They have Alaskan bison, and you see them. The tracks are everywhere, but they tend to stay away from you.
bison like a buffalo?
Yes.
They make good burgers.
As a matter of fact, they imported them just 4 years ago, and they're getting to the point where they might open up the hunt if you want to go to Shagalak, which is a very interesting little town in the middle of absolutely nowhere, literally.
Wow. All right. So you've done all kinds of long distance races, and then I want to talk more about the different expeditions that you've done. Like you've done a bunch of expeditions that are not only, I guess, about endurance, like the races you've done, but they're also mix endurance with science as well.
Yeah,
like,
that was a little bit of a fantasy for me. So
I was just thinking, gosh, it's totally Jorge, like science, numbers with like, I don't know, doing crazy long distance things. You've done so many things that gosh, I would like to talk maybe a couple of expeditions. Like in 2015 you did and you correct me how this is called, but it's called the Shackleton and Finnish Business 100th anniversary. So
that was actually an aborted attempt.
Yeah, but you still you still did that. So why don't you tell us more about it?
Yeah.
And for the people who are not aware who Ernest Shackleton was, can you just tell us real quick who he was and why he inspired, the event that you did?
Ernest Shackleton is one of the top players in the heroic polar exploration days of the early 20th century. He was hanging out with Scott and with Amundsen and all those guys. And just like them, he was trying to be the first one to get to the South Pole. And he actually got 100 miles short of it before he had to turn back because he didn't have food anymore.
Okay.
And then with that failure, he decided that, and after Amundsen got the pole, he decided that he would cross Antarctica. Of course, he never even made it to the continent because, famously his ship got crushed by the ice.
The endurance, right? Okay.
And ever since, people in the UK have been trying to do that crossing that Shackleton never got to make.
How long was it?
I'm
sorry. How what the distance? Sorry.
It's probably about 1,200 miles, and through difficult terrain.
And of course, he's known not only for all the ordeals that he went through, but his leadership skills, right? His leadership philosophy, right?
Right. He was able to keep a group of people who were in an absolutely desperate situation together, working for the single purpose of surviving, and managed to not lose a single person in his crew.
So he inspired. Is it called the Shackleton and Finnish Business?
So
it's just insane.
It was 100 years.
More about that. Okay.
In 2015, it was the 100th anniversary of that attempt,
Okay.
And so Charlie Peyton, who's a British explorer who's been to the North Pole, decided that he would try to do it. He would try to reproduce the Shackleton expedition.
Okay.
And he thought that to spice things up and to make fundraising easier, he would have a newbie in his team.
Oh, okay.
And so he announced a crowdfunding thing where people applied to be the newbie. And so a few hundred people sent their resumes to Charlie to be part of the expedition.
Okay.
And so lo and behold, I get a phone call. And Charlie says, "Hey, I looked at your resume and you look like a really interesting guy." The next thing you know, I find myself at the British Special Forces training grounds in South Wales.
Was that like kind of all of a sudden? Like I remember, you guys were just, your regular Facebook posts, and the next day you're like, "Yeah, I'm flying to this place because I'm gonna do this." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, it was out of nowhere.
Okay.
And I get to meet 11 other crazies. I mean, people that have done incredible things. Like they've rowed across the Pacific.
Wow.
They've just impossible people.
That's awesome.
And then Charlie Peyton is with a trainer from the Special Forces and then 2 psychologists.
Okay.
And throughout the weekend, they just torture us as much as they can to figure out who's worthy.
So it was a weekend.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the photos. It just looks awful.
It was nuts.
Okay.
It was completely nuts. I mean, they would throw us into a frozen river, and down to our necks. And the only way were 12 people in the water, and the only way we were allowed to come out is if we were able to count to 12 collectively. Anybody without communicating, we all had to count. One person had to do a number, and another person had to do another number.
Oh no!
And if two people spoke at the same time, we had to start from one again.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds awful.
And it
Especially
was
in that
on and
condition.
on like that. It was really funny.
So you went through that process, and you were one of the finalists. Well, I mean,
Unfortunately, Charlie needed $4 million to pull off the expedition, and
you should have called. Hey.
and he didn't pull it off. So
Okay. So
nobody got to celebrate the 100th anniversary by crossing Antarctica.
and again, that's part of your fascination with all things endurance, long distances, but
Yep,
also
yep.
weather.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And-
weather is a wonderful toy.
My God.
It also explains part of the expedition thing. After you've run a few hundreds or a few organized races, you
Mhm.
start wanting to have more variance. What happens if I take the 8 stations out? What
So,
happens if I make the distance longer?
So does it get all like? It's interesting because I don't know. I'm thinking about Ironmans because I've
Yep.
done more Ironmans than long distance endurance sports, and you're right. Like the way I'm thinking about these races is like, oh, Ironman sanctioning events, the brand. I'm not that crazy about them because I don't know, they've gone way too corporate, and it doesn't matter. And so then you think, what's next?
Yeah.
And for me, my bucket list race is this series of races. Like one is in Norway called the Norseman,
Oh yeah, sure.
right?
Brutal.
And the Swissman. And so they
yes.
have all these races in my mind,
Sweet.
right? Because it's like that's what's next.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so it makes sense.
Yeah, you could say there are some people who really like continuous improvement and they appreciate shaving seconds from their
Yeah.
Ironman.
Yeah.
At some point, if that gets old, then you look for other challenges.
Interesting. I never thought of that. Okay. I guess I understand why you did that. I did it. Not really, but I know now. All right. So another expedition that you did in 2016 is called Spice.
Yep.
I'm going to let you explain
Sure.
what that was, what was the goal of it, and what were the results.
So this was a really a crazy attempt by me to do all of the things that I love. So flying myself north of the Arctic Circle, doing an endurance thing in the Arctic, and having some science around it. And so the science excuse, if you will, was the fact that there's a satellite called Terra who at the time was having some trouble. People were starting to suspect that the sensor they used to measure albedo, which is the reflectance of surfaces on the Earth, was not working properly, and that was putting in danger many conclusions from papers about greenhouse effects and climate change.
Okay.
And so there was an opportunity there to go to one of the ice caps on the Baffin Island, which is a very homogeneous surface, to be able to make good measurements at the same time, ground measurements at the same time the satellite goes overhead, making the same measurements, so that you can ground truth whatever Terra and its instrument MODIS were measuring. And so that was the science agenda. And I ran into a scientist who could organize that, Dr. Uliana Horodisky.
So yeah, it's a crew of 3 people.
And then once we put all the equipment together, we had a friend with whom we've trained to do some suborbital astronaut stuff, and he joined the expedition with us.
Was he part of Possum?
Yes,
I've seen the videos.
He's the creator of Possum.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So wait. So
he used to be a NASA engineer as well.
So was Spice your idea? Like we were like, okay.
Spice was my baby. So I knew I wanted to go to the Arctic. I knew I wanted to fly myself there, and I knew I wanted to do some science.
Because that's a question that I had. I was like, how do you think of it? Like, did you came across I don't know, was this some kind of issue that was going around for a while and you were like, okay, maybe, or did somebody come to you and we're like, okay, we need to, do this or
there's an evolution, and it started on the sports side, if you will. We took Wendy and I took training with Eric Larson on polar travel. We spent 10 days with him up there.
Polar Explorer.
And then I used some of that in Greenland. I went to Greenland and did glacier traverse on the east coast of Greenland.
Wow.
And so at that point I said, okay, I'm ready. I need to do something on my own.
Yeah.
And so I thought, how can I design something that is really cool and sexy?
For that expedition, one of the things that I read is that, okay, you prepared, yourself for months or even, I don't know, who knows, years for these kind of things. And then you get there and the conditions were not good since the very beginning, right? I think basically climate change. I mean, it was, can you talk more about what you encountered when you got there?
Generally speaking, climate change is dramatic up there.
Climate change? Why climate change?
It's you can use any label you want, but the fact is that up there the glaciers are disappearing at an incredible speed. The weather is going crazy. The hunters that knew where to find the animals and when to go safely, they don't know how to do it anymore. All of their traditional knowledge is no longer applicable. Right. That's the kind of change we're talking about. More specifically, in our case, the ocean was melting way earlier than expected.
So it was not as safe as you thought it would be to go through
to get to the entry point that we had chosen, which was an easy entry point, and so we had to choose an alternate entry point that was just horrid.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. How do you do it? Like, if okay.
So you're trying to get on an ice cap, and the way you get on an ice cap is by climbing up a glacier. An ice cap has a bunch of glaciers coming down it.
Right.
Some of them are friendly, some of them are unfriendly.
Right.
And we had to go through an unfriendly one.
So, what were the results of that expedition? Like, was MODIS, I guess? I mean, was it working the way it was supposed to be working?
So, you would want to ask for the details of the science output, Dr. Horodisky in particular. But one of the things that I know came out of it was with the snow samples that we took, the measurements about dust, the influence of the forest fires in North America.
Oh, wow.
As those fires increase, you get more transport of all the ashes and things like that to the surface, and that accelerates the melting. And so Uliana was taking snow samples on the surface and deeper, and processing them through filters and then machines that count the density of dust and carbon black in the snow.
By the way, I mean, you flew a Cessna plane from Boulder to Canada?
To Baffin Island, yeah.
Okay.
To a town called Qikiqtarjuaq.
Yeah, I read that word. I'm like, how do you say that?
It takes a few years.
So, how did this, I don't know, fascination with flying start? Yeah.
Well,
curiosity.
Curiosity, and if you're interested in space, you go to Houston, and they have a big sky because it's flat as a plate. And so you're immediately tempted to go fly, just to get closer to the moon and to the stars. And I got hooked. I love flying, and my dear wish is that every single adventure I'm involved in includes some flying.
Yeah. Oh my God!
At the end of the first Iditarod, my first Iditarod attempt, I immediately went back to Anchorage and got on a ski plane and started learning landing on snow and ice, which of course opens the doors for the next set of expeditions.
Let's talk about Iditarod. So, okay, you've done all these ultra distance events. You've done a bunch of crazy expeditions. When did you start thinking about the Iditarod? Which, for our listeners, can you tell more about what the race is, where it is, the formats, the distances? So
the Iditarod Trail is a national historic monument, and it's an assemblage of original trails that were being used by natives, by Russians when Alaska was Russian.
Right.
And it was all threaded into a single 1,049-mile trail, the Alaskans like to say, because
Say that again.
They put all those little chunks of trail.
No, the distance.
Oh, 1,049.
1,049 miles.
The truth is, the trail only exists for a very limited amount of time because it goes through rivers and lakes and swamps when things melt.
Oh my God.
And the trail disappears in most places. So the trail, the full trail never exists entirely at the same time.
Wow.
The only reason it exists at all is because of the dog race. And so we take advantage of the dog race to do the other race.
So that the dog race takes place before
it takes off after us.
So they groom the trail.
They groom the trail. So the grooming in front of the dogs, you have the grooming crew,
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
and we start before them, so we don't have the advantage of that. We have some advantage from a previous race, which is the Iron Dog.
Yeah.
The Iron Dog is with snow machines.
Wow.
And so we have some advantage because of that, but then we get the advantage of the groomers. And then when they're all done, there's the sweep team that goes behind the dog teams. The problem is weather is happening all along those 1,000 miles. And so the grooming crew might go by, and 3 hours later, it starts snowing like crazy, and all their work disappears instantly.
Wow.
And that's what happened this year. We had snowstorm every 2 days. And so the trail was gone in enormous, incredible amount of places. The wind was huge. So, for instance, there's a part of the trail that actually goes through the ocean, which is another reason the trail doesn't exist outside of the winter.
Right.
And the wind had created all kinds of sastrugi that made it really difficult to move around.
Okay, so 1,049 miles in Alaska takes place in February. I assume that's winter in Alaska.
Yep.
My God. It goes from Anchorage to this. Is it a town? Nome? Is it a
Nome.
town? Okay.
Yeah. So, yep. Nome is a big town by Alaskan standards. It's 3,600 people.
That's hilarious. Okay. And how do you get in that? Like, how do you qualify for it, or you get invited?
You submit your resume, basically. And what Billy Koich is looking for, Billy and Erica are the race directors.
Okay.
Billy is one of the bigger participants in the development of fat bikes in Alaska.
Oh,
he has a museum.
Oh, wow.
So Billy is really into offering the Iditarod Trail to people who want to experience it.
Okay.
And so he likes military experience, because then he knows that you know how to handle cold.
Yeah.
He likes mountaineering. He likes endurance racing.
Okay.
As parts of the resume.
Uh-huh.
But you only know that you're in because he chose you, if you will. You apply and he decides.
So the race so you had your first attempt in 2017 last year.
Yep.
And then you didn't finish, and then you went back this year and you finished.
There are a total of 18 people that have ever finished.
That's what I was going to ask.
Several years, nobody finishes.
Is it true that there's a person who's finished it 10 times?
Yes. So, after all these numbers that I just gave you, it turns out there's one guy who's actually finished 10 times. 9 times on foot, 1 time on fat bike.
No pressure, Jorge. No pressure.
He was
nine to go.
He quit this year. I was actually with him for a while, and
What's
he quit.
his name? Hewitt.
Tim Hewitt.
Tim Hewitt.
Yep.
Okay.
A lawyer in Philadelphia.
Wow. So
there's a book written about him too.
Yeah, I mean, I was not aware of him, but while doing my study for this interview, I learned about him like 10 times. He's like unbelievable.
And the person who wrote the book, Jill Homer, is also exceptional in that she's the record holder on the woman's side for fat bike to Nome.
Wow. So so you got accepted to do the race last year. Just walk us through. How was it? What happened? Why you DNF'd?
Yeah, it was very difficult to conceive of it. Having done the 300, I thought that the 1,000 would be an extension of that. And very early in the race, I realized it was a completely different game.
Why?
Because the 300 is still a race. You are racing with people. You have aid stations, even if they're 70 miles apart. In this race, you technically have no support.
Okay.
But you do have access to resources that you often don't even know are there. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of adventure and discovery that are involved in order to actually make it.
Okay. You mean like what, for instance?
Like you might go by a cabin, and it turns out the cabin has people in it. It's a private cabin. And they might see you and say, "Hey, why don't you stop over?" And they might invite you to have some moose steaks.
And for instance, I read that I think post that you did. But so it's not that you need, because in this blog post that you talk about, I think there was like a library. There's like a school maybe. So you were not aware of those points before.
No, sometimes you are and sometimes you aren't. So sometimes you know that there's a school.
Okay.
Sometimes you even have the phone number of the principal. But other times, for instance, we had to change our plan because one of the cabins that we were hoping to stay at was no longer available. And so then we decided, okay, we'll see if we can stay in town. And the town has a school, but we hadn't planned on that, so we don't know the phone number or anything.
Right. Wow.
And so as we're thinking about that, a guy comes the opposite direction on a snow machine, and he turns out to be the son of the maintenance guy at the school.
Oh, really?
So he gives us the phone number of his father.
Wow.
And we use our satellite phone to call him.
Oh, no.
And one of the wonderful things about Alaska is that all of those people are they know what it means to be in Alaska and to be out there. And so the guy is ready waiting for us at 3 a.m.
Wow.
He opens up the school for us to be able to have a place to sleep.
It's funny. It makes me think of when I was a kid, we used to go visit my grandfather in like the north of Lima. So you go through the countryside, the Andes basically. And like people in those little villages are so like welcoming and nice,
Yes.
and they offer you whatever things they have and they don't have. You
Yes.
know, I have an interesting anecdote. One time our car broke down and we're in the middle of that tundra. I'm not kidding you, and like we didn't have any place to stay, and we ended up staying in this hut that was owned by the father of this lady who was a top terrorist.
Oh my God.
Because I don't know if you remember, in Peru we used to deal with terrorism.
Yes.
In the early 80s all the way through the early 2000s. There was this party, or there's a group called the Shining Path. Anyway, so she was one of the the stars of the terrorist group, and we ended up staying with the dad of this lady who it's just insane. We didn't learn about that until days after that happened, but going back to people being really helping each other.
That's part of the magic in the Iditarod race.
And so things didn't go as planning last year. What were the things that happened?
So one of the things that you don't realize compared to a normal race is that you're entirely on your own. So if you're on a river and the ice is too thin and you break through, you're on your own. You have to take care of the situation as well you can, and no one's going to come to help you, and no one's ahead of you to tell you what's dangerous or not dangerous. You have to make those determinations by yourself, and you have to choose. You don't have the trail per se does not quite exist. You have to find the path that is going to allow you to get where you want.
I'm already stressed out on thinking that, because I can barely I don't know how to read a map. Like every time I go and to some destination, I use the GPS, and Amy, she's like, she's really good at navigating. She's an amazing navigator, and I'm always like, just use the GPS, I don't. But oh my God.
Well, the original, the race was born when a group of friends got together and said, okay, $400 each. Let's they were in Anchorage. Let's meet in Nome. So it was just like that race in between Ouray and Telluride.
High Rock?
No, the shorter one, the one that just goes over. Imogene.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Imogene story is that mining friends challenged each other to go from Ouray to Telluride, and so this is exactly the same. A bunch of friends challenged each other to do 1,000 miles through Alaska.
It's so funny how a lot of these kinds of things happen as a result of a challenge.
But at this point, what's happened is people are so scared of the things that you've just described that some people have managed to create a GPS trail from previous editions, and so we pass our GPS track from father to daughter or mother to son.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that we do have that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it makes sense.
Backup.
You want your loved one or to be safe.
But the thing is, the trail is not the same year to year. It's recreated from scratch, and so it's not. It doesn't really necessarily go through the same spots.
I mean, I get stressed out when I'm doing a trail run and I don't see the little flags. I'm like, did I get lost?
Now we cheat a little bit because when dog race goes by, they have laths, and the laths are like pieces of wood. They're a yard long. And so those, as long as they haven't been broken or they haven't gone away, they're very helpful in many places. Are those the
tripods?
No, the tripods are also, they're actually there always, and they're an indication of where the Iditarod Trail is.
Okay.
But there are two issues with the tripods. They're not everywhere, and they're very far apart from each other. And very often with the wind, it reduces visibility because of all the flying snow, and you can't actually see one tripod from the next.
Wow.
And so those are interesting times.
So what was the reason why you were not?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was there
Didn't finish the race last
There were
year.
two issues.
Okay.
The dogs were diverted. Instead of starting from Anchorage, they started from Fairbanks because at the time they had to make the decision, there was no snow on the trail.
Okay.
As soon as they made the decision, snow dumped like crazy.
Okay.
And so what we found was enormous amounts of snow and no preparation whatsoever.
Oh.
So even with 32-inch snowshoes, I was post-holing.
Oh, wow.
And then we got into in the most remote part of that route. It got into the minus 40s, minus 45. Not sure just how cold it got, but it got extremely cold. And so to the point where things break because it's so cold. And, you're sleeping outside inside a bivvy, and that's fine because your sleeping bag is amazingly good. But in the morning, your body is at low energy, and you have to come out of there and switch from the protection of the sleeping bag to moving in minus 45. That moment in between where you're not generating your own heat is extremely dangerous.
Really?
You have to put your shoes on. Your feet are practically naked. And so the first thing you do is you eat some food inside your sleeping bag so that you start generating some heat. And then you move camp as fast as you can. You don't make breakfast. You don't do anything. You just pack up as fast as you know how to do it.
Okay.
And get moving so that you can generate heat by moving.
Wow.
And if you fail in that transition, something will get frostbitten. It's that simple.
Wow.
And then when you're moving, the wind will create frostbite. If you won't notice. You really have to pay attention. You have to constantly self-assess everything that's going on, and you're constantly changing layers. You don't want to sweat. If you sweat, you lose the insulation. And so you can't sweat, and you can't get cold. So you're constantly changing layers. The sun comes up, that's a heat input. You're going to start sweating. You immediately change layers. The sun goes away, it gets much colder. You need to add layers.
Talk about what kind of layering do you use or wear when doing these races?
So typically about 5 layers. And the base layer is one that just wicks. And you try to wick the sweat away if you can. So I don't use technical because you're going to be 30 days out there. So imagine 30 days with the same technical shirt.
Hey, buy merino wool stuff.
That's exactly
with
what I wear.
odor control.
Yes. So that's one layer. Then 2 more layers of merino wool. That's what I was wearing at the time. Then a down jacket. Then a down vest.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much.
Are there specific brands that are good for this kind of thing, or is your typical? I mean, I don't know, North Face, Icebreaker.
What really happens is that you start with whatever they sell, and then you modify it for the race. So, for instance, in order to adjust temperatures, one of the things that you want to have is zippers on your sleeves. So that you can cool down the arms. Right. The arms are a great place to radiate heat.
Right.
So if you think that you're going to sweat before you actually take an entire layer off, which forces you to stop moving and take the sled connection off. Yeah. You just open the zippers for the arms, and Wendy developed incredible skills and techniques to be able to modify equipment to make it Iditarod specific.
Nice. Iditarod by Wendy. There you go. There you go. New brand.
A lot of those tricks, by the way, I learned from another guy who's actually finished 3 or 4 times by this point, Beat Jellergerner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw a post or a video where you talk about this piece of fabric that you put.
Oh, sure.
I think that you learned from Eric Larson.
From Eric Larson, the beak. So you have to use the goggles when it's windy.
Yeah.
And so you sew a beak hanging off the goggles, and then you can sew also a tiara around it.
Yeah, that's genius because that happens, right? The fogging, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want that to happen.
And so you went back.
That was an important part of the training, by the way. Went a lot to the Continental Divide when things were blowing.
Yeah.
That was perfect training. So you get 65-mile-an-hour winds, and you can really test your equipment.
That's what I was gonna say. Like between last year and this year, I mean the training. I've seen posts of you guys, you would go to our local trails, when when it would be really cold or it would dump tons of snow. You would do your thing. You would pull tires.
Yep.
Where else would you go? You were saying the Continental Divide.
Yep. So Rogers Pass.
Would
Ridge.
Would you go to other places besides Colorado?
You don't. I mean, if you really want to be specific, you should go to Alaska. And then you get the real specificity, because you're going to get the very low temperatures and the high winds all in one place. Whereas when I was training in Colorado, I never got -18 was the coldest I was able to find.
And temperatures go all the way to -40.
So it depends on how lucky you get. If you get very unlucky, it can get. While we were there was a -67 Fahrenheit somewhere in the state.
Wow. So, my God.
So you got to be ready for that, because you don't know what's coming at you. Because you're going to be out there 30 days.
Yeah.
You can't forecast. You have to have enough equipment to put up with anything that hits you.
How many days did it take you to finish the race?
34 days.
More than a month. Oh my God. 34 days.
Yeah.
That's a month, and that is like 15.
And part of the reason is 800 miles on snowshoes. All right, so you're incredibly slow, because there's no way, there's snowshoes about this big.
So what did you do this time? Differently.
So part of it was the specific training on the ridge. The fact that I knew that my layers would work incredibly well, because I had put them to the test with the huge winds.
Okay.
Because the slightest crack is going to make your life miserable.
Oh yes.
And it's a combination of all. It's not just pieces of equipment; it's the system working together.
Right.
And knowing that you can still drink and eat in spite of the fact that you have a balaclava and another balaclava and then the goggles and the beak and everything else in your way. Knowing that with your giant meats you can still manipulate everything that you need to manipulate while you're out there.
Okay, so you're wearing all these layers. How you're in the middle of your thing? How do you pee?
So that's interesting. So
or number two.
So So for number two, you make a refuge. So the trail is very narrow, but on either side of the trail this year, as soon as you get off the trail, you just sunk in snow.
Okay.
So that's a good thing in the sense that now you're a little more protected from the wind, because you're sunk in snow. But now you have to make a space for yourself.
Yeah. Wow.
And then you choose two trees behind you that are spaced adequately.
Yeah.
That you can use as supports.
Oh my God.
And so now you're deep in snow, which means the wind's not going to be a problem. You have a way to quickly get into position. You get your toilet paper at the ready, which you use only as the second step. First step, you prepare some snowballs.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so using nature, I guess?
Yes, absolutely, because you can't carry that much toilet paper, 34 days of toilet paper, especially if you get any kind of GI distress.
That is so cool.
Probably a little more detail than we.
No, this is interesting because one of the things I was just wondering, like, you don't wear like a diaper, for instance.
No, you don't need to. So as far as the peeing goes, it's not that terrible. What you do need to do is understand your pants enough that you don't need to look down below to know what's going on. So you have probably 3 layers for pants. If they have snaps, that can run you crazy because you might have trouble snapping. So try to avoid snaps. Just like an old man, try to have just elastic bands. And just make sure the wind's at your back. It makes obviously a huge difference, for all kinds of reasons.
Right. So training gear is where really help you to complete.
Yes, and the training. So the training that I did the first time was very much focused on distance. So it's 1,000 miles is a long distance, so I better do distance. It turns out that what really is going to make the difference is how well your system works for you for 34 days, because you're going to be stuck with whatever you brought for 34 days. And every time, if anything's difficult, it's going to rob you of psychological energy. And after you have to do it you have to go through your own original incompetence in choosing your systems for the 100th time. You're like, it's like the Chinese torture with a little drip.
Oh yeah. So after 34 days, I remember seeing your photos.
Yeah, you get all kinds. So some of the days, actually, 3 days was 0 mile days. And one of the reasons is that we actually had to rescue a racer from another race.
Oh, wow.
And so we were delayed.
But what happened?
So the racer, there's this was the 350-mile race, and there's an endurance legend that is barely known in the lower 48 called Dave Johnston.
Okay.
He's an incredible athlete. I mean, of caliber of anybody else, but he only does long winter races, and so he's won the 350-mile race now 7 times in a row. This young guy, 34-year-old guy, I think, that had done Arrowhead and another cold race 7 times, was ahead of him.
Okay.
He was going to beat him.
Okay.
So he decided he wouldn't sleep and he wouldn't eat.
All right. Yeah.
And about 25 miles from the finish line, he lost it.
Wow.
He went nuts. He disconnected from his sled, which contains everything he needs to survive.
Right.
And he walked off the trail.
Wow.
And so they found that the sled and nothing else.
Uh-huh.
And just a few weeks earlier in the Yukon Arctic Ultra, someone had done that, and he's lost 2 feet and 1 hand.
Wow.
So everybody was really concerned that he would die. And so the race director for our race had the equipment necessary to be able to go look for him, and found him alive and unharmed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But, that was one of the days that actually 2 days where we didn't move. The longest day was 60 miles. So the average day is about a marathon and a half.
Okay. And you do that in what? How many hours? You say like 20?
So depending. It's
Okay.
if you have
20.
a beautiful sunny day with a trail that is very compact,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to do it in normal endurance race times. You're
Wow.
going to finish in 10 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
If it's fluffy snow, you're wearing the snowshoes, the wind is crazy, you're going to take 20 hours.
Wow. Running
It's whatever nature serves up that day.
gosh. My God, I have so many questions. We're gonna have to do a part 2. But let me really, I'm like I have like 30 plus questions, but we can stay overnight.
It's almost a different sport, actually, to be honest.
So you've done this. I'm just curious, what's in your mind of what's next?
So I have some confidence now that I can go off into, La La Land up north and find my way and take care of myself.
Yeah.
And I love flying. And so the prototypical adventure now consists in getting on the ski plane and flying to parts of the Arctic where almost no one has ever been. And then ski off from the air, secure the airplane and then ski off into an endurance adventure and then come back to the plane and fly back.
Do you have any places in mind right now?
There are some prototypical places. One of them is at the very northern end of Ellesmere Island, is a tiny island that is often used to start trips to the North Pole.
Okay.
There's actually one Canadian bush pilot who flew a Piper Cup there and crashed it.
Wow.
And so that would be a wonderful place to go. Then there's another famous bush pilot in Alaska who actually flew from Barrow to Svalbard.
Okay.
And so that would be a great expedition, maybe a combination of flying and skiing.
So these are places where people haven't been before, or like people don't usually go, or
So if you look at how things are going today, people pay big bucks now to get a badge on doing the last degree expedition to the North Pole. They take advantage of the Borneo base that the Russians set up,
Okay.
just 1 degree off the North Pole. And so it's just like Everest now. You have dozens of people who do that. I'm looking for places of the Arctic who have some history and that are not in the limelight, and where I can bring insight and perspectives, that other people don't get because they're not interested in it.
That's awesome.
One of the obvious one is the magnetic pole. The magnetic pole is, of course, in a totally different part from the North Pole, and the funny part is that it's moving 50 miles a year.
Wow.
And
That's
so
insane.
that could be the basis for a really fun expedition.
That's incredible. Wow.
Literally running after the magnetic North Pole.
And that's incredible. And do you have an idea of when you want your next expedition to be?
So I've been trying to buy the freaking airplane that would allow me to do this now for over a year. And it's unfortunately, times have changed and people don't do this kind of stuff anymore. And so they don't make those airplanes. You have to find a very old airplane that has that kind of capability.
Modified it?
Just find it.
Okay.
Many of them are no longer flying. Some of that, they're becoming a collector item, so they become cream puffs. People keep them in their hangar just to show them to their friends, and maybe go buy a burger at the next airport. They're very difficult to find. One of those original airplanes that is in exploration status.
Wow! So you need to find that first too. Because I'm thinking, Jorge, do it quickly so you can come back to the podcast and we can interview you again. But
I'm all for that.
Next year or what?
So if anybody can help me find that airplane and sponsor me to make this happen.
Oh my God, this is amazing. And finally, I mean, again, I could ask you so many questions, but can you tell or can you talk more about your business, Cold Latitudes? What is it that you do?
So one of the things that has always surprised me in my experience with organizations is how much frustration there is. You have all kinds of surveys like the Gallup survey for engagement that shows that only a third of Americans give a crap about their job.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And so if you contrast that with what I've had the fortune and privilege to do in totally being able to express what I wanted to do, to go places like the Iditarod or the Arctic.
Yeah.
I really would like to be able to help organizations and people to get to the same point. Do you just get a job because you have to, or you create a business because you have to, or do you create it because you love it?
Yeah, that's really powerful.
And Cold Latitudes, the idea of Cold Latitudes is to collect all these lessons and insights from a place that doesn't tolerate mistakes.
Right.
Where learning is quick and decisive.
Right.
And being able to share that with other people and perhaps help increase that percentage of people that actually love their job and love the impact they can have to their job.
Right. That's awesome. Wow. I mean, I thought it was so fascinating. I didn't know that what you did at MIT was kind of building the base for what you do now.
Yep.
That in combination with your experiences racing and all kinds of adventures. I mean, that makes sense.
It's a happy intersection.
I love it. Cold Latitudes. Okay, so one final random question: Who designs the patches of your expeditions?
Yes, absolutely. It's a bandito. It's a Boulder Bandito.
No, that's so cool.
Yes, Cindy Yaklik has been a graphic designer for many years.
Okay.
And every time I organize an expedition, I knock on her door and she designs.
And so like, do you get to wear all the patches in one jacket? Is there like a patch etiquette?
I'm not that crazy, I just like to have a patch that represents or symbolizes, the wonderful opportunity that I've got.
Jorge, you have endured a 90-minute conversation with Dig Deep, so I'm proud to present you the Dig Deep patch.
Thank you.
for enduring 90 minutes talking with me. This has been amazing. Like I knew that this was gonna be a fun chat, but I mean, again, I could just keep going and ask you all kinds of things, but we definitely need to do a part 2. Don't worry, you don't have to buy an airplane and do another expedition before we get together again, because I have so many other questions. But thank you very much for your time. This has been amazing. I had so much fun. For our listeners, you can follow Jorge and his company Cold Latitudes on Facebook. It's at Cold Latitudes, and online is coldlatitudes.com. Thank you very much. Wendy, thank you for being here. You're awesome. Thank you very much. Till the next time.
Thank you, Hugo.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.